Welcome back to Plants Not Plastic. I'm Nikita and I bring you whole food, plant-based recipes that are delicious, inexpensive, simple, and healthy. I'm here to bring you recipes that I eat day to day that have me stay trim and healthy. I'm by no means an expert, but I do base all of my kind of diet fundamentals off of peer-reviewed research. Right now I'm interested in sharing recipes, but if you do want to check out research, I will have some stuff linked below in the comments, as well as some of my top book recommendations. I also don't do things like count calories, track my macros, or especially stay away from carbs. All of my meals are starch-centric and have things in them like rice, beans, potatoes, pasta, and corn. Those types of foods will keep you feeling full and satisfied. So today I wanted to give you a super quick recipe for tomato sauce. If you go out to the store, there are going to be two types of tomato sauce that you can get pre-made. One is going to be in a jar, which most of the time is going to have oil in it, and the other is going to be in a can. You can find ones that have some spices in them already, but they're going to be pretty bland, so you would want to bring them home and add some stuff to them anyway. This recipe is specifically if you want something that is very fresh, that just highlights the very few ingredients that's in it. It's also a great recipe if you're just looking for something to whip up for yourself right in the moment, because it is best eaten fresh, as opposed to doing some kind of a batch recipe like a marinara sauce. This recipe has 4 times more fiber and 1/3 of the fat compared to something that you would buy at the store. I will have some more information at the end about the nutrition facts, but if you want all the details, you can go to my blog at PlantsNotPlastic.com, where I'll have a full nutrition label that links out to Cronometer. And as always, it is whole food, plant-based, vegan-friendly, and made without oil. This recipe is really just 3 ingredients. I'm going to show you the amounts that I use if I'm making a single portion, but you can obviously scale it up if you're making it for more people. You can also play around with the amounts because it really is pretty forgiving as a recipe. So I use 5 Roma tomatoes, 5 cloves of garlic, and about 10 leaves of fresh basil. And then all you need to do in terms of prep is just dice your tomatoes and then slice your garlic. You can mince it if you want to, but I really do find that for this recipe, having it sliced and then keeping it kind of as those whole pieces means that you're gonna get good fresh garlic flavor as you're eating it. And then for the basil, the way that I have found is easiest to cut it is you actually lay all the leaves out and then twist them together and slice them. I did also want to share a quick tip about the best way to cut tomatoes, because I do think that this can be a challenging vegetable for some people. So in general, the best thing to do if you have a good sharp knife, which you should have in your kitchen if you don't, is to really use the weight of your knife to cut the vegetable rather than sawing at it or using pressure in order to cut it. So I always start by cutting off the top, and then I slice that up because I like to use as much of the tomato as possible, and then I will cut it in half. And again, it's really about just letting the knife do the work for you. It's kind of hard to describe, but there's 2 different ways that you can use your knife. One is cutting forward and the other is cutting backward. If you have fresh tomatoes like I do right now, cutting forward is going to be faster. The skins will be firmer and they'll be easier to cut, but if you have a soft tomato that's a couple of days old, using the method where you cut toward you is actually going to keep the tomato more intact. It just gets more delicate over time as it ripens, and using the method where you pull toward you is going to use the weight of the knife even more and make it less likely that you're going to smush the tomato. Once you've cut it the first way, then dicing it going back the second way, I do find that in either case, pulling back toward you is going to, again, keep the tomato intact rather than smushing it. I also find that if you're less comfortable with a knife, that using the method where you pull back toward you is going to just cause you to be a little bit more delicate with the tomato, where pushing forward, it is more likely for you to actually put some pressure and weight into it and then smush the tomato. You'll just take your tomato and your garlic and put it straight into a medium-sized saucepan, and then you'll take the medium saucepan, put it on the stove on a medium heat, and you'll just let it cook down for between 20 to 30 minutes. This is really dependent on how cooked down you want the tomatoes to be. If you want them to have kind of more that fresh, like acidity, you would cook them for less. They will be a little bit more watery this way, or you can cook them down for longer and they'll get sweeter, they'll caramelize a little bit more, and they'll be less watery and more of like what you'd expect is a traditional pasta sauce. As it's cooking, you will just want to make sure that you stir it every so often, just to make sure that it is cooking evenly, that you don't have your heat too high. and that it's cooking down well. Also, you know, by checking in on it every so often, it'll give you a chance to see how cooked down the tomatoes have gotten and how much longer you want for them to cook. So this is after about 20 minutes. You can see that a lot of the water has steamed off or cooked off of the tomatoes, but they do still have quite a bit of water. So, you know, this is a point where you could stop. Everything is cooked down to a really nice level at this point. It's gonna be fresher and more acidic, or you can keep cooking it to have it be even sweeter. So now it's cooked down for about 25 minutes, and if you see, there is not as much water. If you did continue to cook it, then it would get to a point where there was pretty much no water left, and it would begin to caramelize and stick to the pan a little bit. I'm gonna stop at this point and go ahead and turn the stove off and take it off the heat. You can do this with your pot still on the stove, but the last thing that you'll do is just add your basil and mix it in while the tomato sauce is hot and fresh off the stove. And then you just mix it all together and it's ready to eat. I don't know if I've actually mentioned this on a video before, but I always add salt at the table rather than in recipes. I find that it helps to bring out the flavor in the dish, and I use a little bit less of it if I'm using salt at the table rather than putting it into the food as I'm cooking. So I really do love this tomato sauce. It's just bright and fresh, especially compared to, something that is cooked for longer, maybe cooked with more ingredients, but especially compared to something that comes in a jar or a can from the store. If you want it to be a little bit less like rustic and chunky, you can take the tomatoes and throw them into a food processor and pulse them until you get a consistency that's a little bit smoother, and it will come out more like a traditional tomato sauce as opposed to something with chunks in it. In terms of the nutrition facts, per 500 calories, my recipe has over 27 grams of fiber with under 5 grams of fat and tons of vitamins and minerals. A store-bought alternative has just 7 grams of fiber with over 14 grams of fat. And in terms of volume, you would get to eat twice as much of my homemade recipe as you would something you bought from the store. Now, in terms of cost, a comparative store-bought is going to be a little bit cheaper at about $1.30, where mine's about $1.60, but you are getting something that is fresh, homemade, has no oil, and doesn't, you know, sit around in a can for a while before you eat it. More fiber, less fat, and more vitamins and minerals. I also did say that this was a serving for just one person. I did not put the full amount onto this recipe that I made, but honestly, I would eat about double of this if I was gonna be sitting down and having it for a full meal. So for me, at least, this much of the sauce is just good for one person. So that's it for today. If you like this video, please do subscribe and click the bell to get notifications when I put out new content. If you tried this recipe, please let me know by commenting below. You can also subscribe to my blog at PlantsNotPlastic.com, as well as follow me on social media. All that information is detailed below in the description. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.